Hi, and welcome to episode number 9 of the 21st Century Pharmacist Show. Last week, I said that I was going to do a 4-part series on the new recommendations about not eating coconut oil and reducing our saturated fat and increasing it with polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, but with a concentration on polyunsaturated fats. So what I want to do today, I brought out the whiteboard and may use it on all 4, I'm not sure yet, of this series. But what I want to do is really just break this down and try to make it as simple as we can. So heart disease is the leading cause of deaths globally, worldwide. So not only that, but a person dies about every 33 seconds in America of heart disease. And the American Heart Association says that 75 million people in America have heart disease. So it's a big deal. I mean, it's been the #1 killer in America for now over 80 years. So we have to address this, and we have to think, how do we reduce our risk, and what do these new recommendations from the American Heart Association mean? And better yet, as I go through this 4-part series, do the recommendations make sense, and will they reduce my risk of heart disease or not? And that's what I want to try to break down and make this very simple as I can. So I'm going to write some things on the board as I go, so it's going to be a little different. But I think that this is going to be very valuable because the American Heart Association has basically said, reduce your intake of coconut oil and saturated fat in general, so that would be other things that we're going to put on the board, and increase your intake of omega-6s or polyunsaturated fats instead of those saturated fats. So let's break this down, look at what they are, what that means, and why this is important to our health and especially to our heart health. So, they give the reasoning that the reason they want us to reduce our saturated fat intake, specifically coconut oil, is because it will help reduce our LDL cholesterol levels. Well, and the theory there is that LDL cholesterol can create heart attacks or heart disease in general. Well, I find it very interesting that about 50%, actually a little more, of the people that have heart attacks and have heart disease have perfectly normal cholesterol. So that has to throw up a red flag in my mind as to maybe we need to rethink exactly that theory. Now, is LDL, high LDL cholesterol, can that be a risk factor for heart disease? Absolutely. But it goes much deeper than that, and it goes into particle sizes and things that we're going to get into as we go. It goes into the ratios of HDL to triglycerides. So we're going to start trying to break that down. Now, we're not going to get it all today. It would be too much. I'm going to stop at a certain point, make a few points at the end, and then we'll continue to build on this over the next 3 shows beyond this one. So let's just start with a simple thing of what the American Heart Association says: decrease saturated fats, and nobody make fun of my writing, please, and increase my polyunsaturated fats. And listen, if I spell something wrong, you don't have to tell me. It's okay. You can tell me, but that's not what we're here for. I'm just trying to get the basics down. So they tell me to do that so that I can decrease my LDL cholesterol numbers. And then they tell me that I should probably follow either the DASH diet or the Mediterranean diet. And I'm sure I won't spell that right, so I'll just stop right there. So this is what I'm told that I need to do. Now, what does the DASH diet stand for? Well, it stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension or High Blood Pressure. And so what does the DASH diet tell me to do? Well, as you might expect, it says low salt, rich fruits, low fat, which shouldn't shock any of us, and whole grains. Now, as we go through this 4-part series, I think that you're going to start to find some flaws in this approach, okay? Whereas the Mediterranean diet focuses more on mono, not poly, but mono unsaturated fats, and we're going to talk a little more about this as we go. And, you know, fruits and vegetables. So, you know, we can talk about this a little more too. Fruits and veggies. Okay, so here's what we have. They're telling us to eat less of this, more of this. Telling me to decrease my salt intake, eat a lot of fruit, eat very low fat, and eat plenty of whole grains. So let's talk about this and break it down. I'm going to do some erasing here. I'm going to try to use different colors that kind of match what we do with red and green. And so if I get messed up on it, I apologize. But we have in our OptiLife RX program, we have shopping lists for you. We have approved foods and non-approved foods. And so when we're using green, that means go. We can eat it. When I'm using red, that means no, we probably ought to stop. And we recommend that you avoid or greatly limit. So I'll try to keep that going as I'm going here. So let's just start with omega-3 fatty acids. Okay, so we're going to look at omega-3 fatty acids. We're going to look at omega-6 fatty acids. And then we're going to look at, I'm just going to write MCT oils. And that stands for medium chain triglycerides. Okay? So, let's start over here because this list is going to be short. This is coconut oils. Okay? So that list is going to be pretty short. And MCT oils, we're going to break it down just a little bit, not a lot. C6, coconut oil contains C6, C8, C10, which are medium chain triglycerides. There's 3 of them. And coconut oil also contains lauric acid. Okay? So that's a bunch of words that we don't have to, in letters and numbers, we don't have to concentrate on, other than to know that C8 is caprylic, probably not spelling it right, acid. And that's a medium chain triglyceride that we encourage people to eat and use because it's thermogenic, which means that it helps the body burn fat. It actually creates an environment where the body burns more calories than we put in from the fat or from the C8 oil. So that medium chain triglyceride has some advantages to help us burn fat. It's good for our brain. It's good for energy. I mean, it's good for a lot of things, okay? So we recommend some of these MCT oils, which coconut oil falls into. And then we recommend that we get, excuse me, I'm using the wrong color, a lot of omega-3 fats. And omega-3 fats, and I'm not going to go into exactly what these stand for because it's just too long and too much for today. But we have DHA, EPA, and ALA. So those are basically the omega-3 fats we'll talk about today. Those are found in things like, or they are found in all beef, but they're found much higher concentrations of omega-3s to omega-6s in grass-fed, and we'll go a step further, grass-finished beef. Grass-fed butter, pastured egg yolks. So pastured eggs, it's mainly found in the yolk or concentrated in the yolk is the omega-3. We can look at things like wild fish, And again, we're not talking farm raised, we're talking wild fish. And we can get down into supplements. So we would have fish oil. The one that we recommend and prefer, krill oil, has a higher absorbability than some of the traditional fish oils. So we like to use krill oil. And so this is kind of a list of things that you would find omega-3s in. Now these are shelf stable, meaning that they last a decent amount of time on the shelf or in our pantries. And they are, they're okay to heat. So these are okay to cook with. It doesn't damage the fat. That's one of the things about saturated fats, or two of the things about saturated fats, is they're shelf stable and they're okay to heat because we don't damage the fat nearly as easily as we do when we get to our omega-6s. So the most commonly found omega-6 will be linoleic acid, okay? So we're going to look at where you would find these things. And you would find them in things like vegetable oils. So think about corn oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, I don't know that it's actually a vegetable, but we'll put it here. We'll kind of separate it. Canola oil. Margarine. Really a vast majority of processed foods, such as chips, pizzas, like frozen pizzas, even ice cream in many cases, microwave popcorn, so that kind of gives us an idea of the differences and where we would find them. Now, the beauty of omega-3 fats and MCT oils like coconut oil is that they are shelf stable. They're okay to heat. We recommend people cook with coconut oil. We recommend people cook with grass-fed butter, or beef tallow is another one we could put up there. But these are and this is key, that's why I'm writing it at the top, inflammatory. Now the omega-6s that I've listed so far, and these vegetable oils are the polyunsaturated that they're telling me to replace my coconut oil with. Certainly in excess, are pro-inflammatory. Now, that's for what I have so far. But omega-6s are an essential part. We need omega-6 fats, but we need to get them from more natural sources, I think, to get the best benefit. So, these are my omega-3s. You can see these things are naturally occurring. These are processed. Okay? And we're kind of going to throw MCT oil over here. We're going to throw our coconut oil over on this side, even though it doesn't really contain a lot of omega-3s. Okay? So, there are, however, ways to get omega-6s that I think are naturally occurring, and much healthier. So we're going to write those below omega-6s in greens. That's going to be most of our nuts, and seeds. Those are naturally occurring. Now we're going to exclude peanuts and peanut butters, okay? And we can talk about that, but peanuts are a legume. They're really not a nut. They have some mold issues. We're going to be better off if we can eat other nuts and seeds. Now on the nuts, we're talking about not roasted, just raw nuts at this point, okay? And preferably organic and the best we can find in everything. So we have nuts and seeds. What else am I missing? Oh, minimally processed olive oil. So we don't want a lot of processing. So we can use those things to get in good quality omega-6s versus what I think are poorer quality omega-6s. So, how do they make? These oils are typically not nearly as shelf stable as these that we've talked about already. So one of the ways that they make these oils in many cases more shelf stable is they create what we call trans fats. And the reason that they use a trans fat, so I'll put, not all, but can contain trans fats. Now, why do they make trans fats out of these omega-6s? Because it actually makes the omega-6s behave a lot more like omega-3s and be more shelf stable. So when they're processing these foods, they can put these trans fats in there and then they'll last longer on the shelf. So obviously when they're making a box of, Pop-Tarts or microwave popcorn, I mean, the expiration date is pretty long on those things, or these cakes and cookies that we commonly see. So lots of these trans fats are found within these oils. These oils, these trans fats, these processed foods, it's everywhere. And there's some research that says just having 33% of our diet from processed foods can be a problem. And in America today, about 75% of the food in a typical grocery store is processed. So we have to start thinking, what are we doing and how do we avoid so many of these things? So let's talk about why we would want to why is LDL cholesterol not always bad for us? So we can look and say, okay, omega-3s or coconut oil or grass-fed beef, grass-fed butter, they may increase our LDL cholesterol. But the important thing, and I've done shows on this already, but we'll bring it up again, is not so much the LDL number as I think the fact that about over 50% of people that have heart attacks or have heart disease have normal cholesterol levels, is that it's about the LDL particle sizes. Now, here's the deal. I'm going to have to do some erasing here, y'all. We want big particle sizes of not only LDL, but of HDL, which is the so-called good cholesterol, the HDL, high-density lipoprotein, that we're told is good for us. So I want to have big LDL particles, and we're going to talk a lot more about this next time, but just to get started, big LDL particles, not small LDL. And I want to have big and lots of HDL and not small HDL. So what happens and how do I get bigger LDL particles and big and lots of HDL particles? Well, guess what? I'm going to write it back up here. My omega-3s and my MCTs, or coconut oil. how do I get more small LDLs and smaller HDLs by the processed omega-6s, so the vegetable oils. And we'll leave it there because that's the one that they're recommending we use. Now, while these saturated fats like coconut oil and grass-fed butters and things may increase my LDL total, they've been shown to increase my LDL particle size, and they've been shown to increase HDL in many people. And when we look at the fact that we want low triglycerides, which is the fat in the blood that's measured in most cholesterol tests, when I eat the right saturated fat, it's also shown to make my particles bigger, give me bigger HDL and more of it, and lower my triglycerides. Whereas omega-6s, the unnatural omega-6s, the processed omega-6s, often increase my triglycerides and decrease my particle size of my LDL and HDL, and maybe even my total HDL. So we're starting to build a picture here of what's going on. Now, my omega-3s are okay to cook with. They're stable. When omega-6s are heated, they become unstable, and this is my polysaturated. And I just realized in my natural omega-6s, I didn't put it on the board, and I should have. This is a biggie. Avocado. I should have had that in there. I think it's avocado, excuse me. So what happens when my omega-6s are heated? So when they're heated, they become unstable. They've been shown to damage DNA, and that's the blueprint inside of all our cells. Okay, there's lots of DNA in our bodies. This is a key thing. They've been shown to increase inflammation, specifically even in the heart. We're going to talk a lot more about that in these upcoming classes. They can raise cancer risk. And last but not least, they can interfere with brain metabolism, which is a whole other subject of memory loss, Alzheimer's, those kind of things. So, when I look at what's going on here, and I look at what I see, I have to start thinking, what do I need to do? Well, let's look at what the average American today, according to the research, has, how many of each, and what's recommended. So, the recommended minimum is to have an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, minimum 4:1. So that means for every 4 omega-6 fatty acids I have in my body, I should have at least 1 omega-3 to make it up, to offset. Most anti-aging physicians who are really looking at DNA and things, lots, I shouldn't say most, lots say we want to get to 1:1. So for every omega-6, we want to have 1 omega-3. Now here's the problem, and here's a big part of why I think so many Americans today, the 75 million Americans, suffer from heart disease. Today in America, you will find research saying that most people, omega-6 to omega-3, are 15:1, so 15 omega-6s to 1 omega-3. We're going to write that in red, that's bad. 4 to 1 and 1 to 1 are good, all the way up to 40 to 1 omega-6s to omega-3s. So when we think that this can increase my inflammation, it can decrease my LDL particle size, it can decrease my HDL total and particles size, it can do all the other things we've talked about. It's no wonder today that we have all these inflammatory disease processes going on in America. It's no wonder that we have so much heart disease. It's no wonder that we have so much diabetes. It's no wonder that we have so much cancer. It's starting to hopefully put together a puzzle of why we have so much arthritis and why we have so many of these autoimmune diseases. So we're going to finish up and we're going to touch on this a lot more as we go. But I want to give you a little bit of information from the University of Stanford. So this was the University of Stanford. I believe they call it their cardiovascular division, something to that effect. Cardiovascular medical division or medicine division, something like that. But they had research that shows that the people with the highest blood levels of omega-3s, that's the ones we have in green, highest blood levels of omega-3s had a 25% less chance, decreased risk of what they called it a fatal heart attack. So they had a 25% decreased risk of dying from a heart attack. That's what they're showing. So I think that's pretty important. And when we know most Americans don't have high levels of omega-3s, but high levels of omega-6, and when we get into the more detail, that inflammation, I believe, and oxidation or damage of our LDL cholesterols is what really creates the heart attacks and what causes that inflammation and what causes that oxidation of the LDL cholesterol. We're going to go more into. But I hope that today you see the difference and you see what we recommend and you see what some other folks recommend. And I hope you can start to think about making better choices on the foods that you eat, the foods that you cook in, the amounts of those things that you take in, cutting down on processed and prepackaged foods, and trying to make sure that we lead a life and make decisions that help us to revive, thrive, and optimize. That's what the whole OptiLife RX program is about. And that's the reason I wanted to use green and red today, because your shopping list has these things done in red and green, so there's no question as to what's going on. So hope you enjoyed it. Please share, please like, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You have to know someone who can benefit from this information. I would certainly appreciate you sharing it. And don't forget, we've got 3 more of these episodes coming up so that we can try to really put the pieces of the puzzle together to help you understand what these recommendations can mean for you. Thanks. See you next time. And I want you to think about the fact that heart disease is still the #1 killer in America today. Cancer is #2. Obesity, diabetes have skyrocketed since then. Childhood obesity, childhood diabetes have skyrocketed since we've gone to those type of recommendations.